Hey everyone, ever wondered how EarthBound achieved those dreamy, layered background effects where two patterns seem to swirl and fade into each other? Today, we're going to take a look at the final piece of the puzzle, transparency blending, combining two textures together with smooth, adjustable alpha control. The idea is simple. We take two different textures and we mix them together. One acts as the base and the other fades on top. Kind of like stacking two layers of colored glass. The magic comes from controlling how much of each image we see, which is done using an alpha value. So a good way to think about this, let's say we lay down one image on a flat board. We then place another image on top of it. If that image is not opaque or transparent at all we're going to see is that top image. However, if that image is transparent at all, we'll start to see more of that bottom image the more transparent that top image is. And so when we're working with tools that have layers and we can modify our opacity, we can see this type of effect. So for my top layer here, the less opacity I have, the more I can see of that bottom image. The more I have, the more I'll see of that top image. So in shader terms, we're sampling two textures instead of one. Let's call them UTexture1 and UTexture2. Then we have a uniform called UAlpha, and that's going to decide how we mix those two together. An alpha of 0 means we only see our first texture, so UTexture1. An alpha value of 1 means we only see the second, so UTexture2. And anything in between those two values is going to blend them smoothly. To do this in WebGL, we can rely on our built-in mix function, which will allow us to blend these two together linearly. So now let's take a look at how we can recreate this effect with WebGL. Right now my WebGL code is set up where we can pass in an array of textures. And so we have these textures here. And then we're currently sampling our first texture and then rendering it out. And then we're sampling our second texture and then rendering it out. If I comment out this code here, we can now see our first texture that we passed in to our textures array. So now to get the effect we're looking for, we need to use our mix function. And in that mix function, we can pass in our two colors that we've sampled from our textures. We then can mix them together based on an alpha value that we provide. First, we'll define a float value for our alpha. I'm going to do float. I'm going to call this UAlpha. Now for our shader, we could pass this in as a uniform, so we don't have to hard code it here. So for our alpha, I'm going to set this to be 0.0. And now we need to use our mix function. So let's make a new vector 4. We're going to call this final color. We're going to set it equal to our mix function. And now we need to provide our two colors that we want to mix together. So we're going to have our text color 1 from our first texture. We'll have our text color 2 from our second texture. And now we specify our alpha to interpolate between those two values. For that, we'll use our UAlpha. And now that we have our new color, we just need to render out that pixel's color to our screen. So we're going to take our out color and we're going to set it equal to our final color. So now once we do this, we should see our first texture that we passed in show up on our screen. Since our alpha is set to 0, that means our top layer, our top image, is fully transparent, so we're just going to see our bottom texture. If we change this to be 1.0, now our top layer, our top texture, is not transparent at all we see is that texture. And now, if we choose a value in between, we can get this effect here, where we can see both of our textures at the same time. And so the lower our value, the more we see of our bottom texture. The higher our value, the more we see of our top texture. And so here's what's happening. We're sampling both of our textures using the same UV coordinate for our pixel that we're currently looking at. We then call our mix function to linearly blend them together, and then we use our alpha uniform or our float here to control how much of that second texture we see. Finally, we output that combined result to our screen. So this is perfect for creating layered effects, fading between battle scenes, or even building the psychedelic transparency look from EarthBound's fights. And here's where things get fun. Since all this happens in a fragment shader, we can combine this transparency effect with other effects like our palette cycling or oscillation. Each texture could even have its own animation, and they'll blend together dynamically. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments what shader effect you'd like to see next. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can grab the source code for free on Gumroad or buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. Links are in the description. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the Phaser 3 implementation of this effect. See you next time.